and welcome, Paul Theron. Thank you so much. What did you think of some of the views of Philip Jennings there with regards to jobs being and inequality being one of the biggest issues going forward?
Philip Jennings is like a gold bug. You can always depend on him for, that particular perspective. Bats strongly for unions on a global basis. I've always wondered what it is that he does in Switzerland and whether he has any other pro-union friends over there. But, he's a cheerful guy. I like his accent.
But it's very true. I mean, jobs needs to be a very big focus. If we do see a contraction coming through, we know what that means. It means job losses.
Yeah, one can relate anecdotal stories. The job story which intrigued me today was the one about workers at Foxconn in China who threatened to jump off the building because they weren't being paid enough and they've been asked to work extra shifts to make the iPad 3 for Apple, which is the world's most successful company. I don't know, man. We live in a world in which labor is not particularly well remunerated relative to capital, but it's been that way for 2 or 3 decades. Yeah. So I know you're holding the flag for the workers here in this conversation.
Devil's advocate is what I'm playing.
I don't know what to say.
Okay, so SAB Miller and the bond issue, your thoughts on that? Are you going to be
speaking of returns for capital,
yeah.
So they made this bid for Foster's, yeah. But it's one of the biggest corporate debt placements, $7 billion. That's like 60 billion rands worth of bonds sold in the US by a UK domiciled company. But the reason I pointed out is just to indicate that despite all those that worried about the health of the credit markets, it still seems possible to get deals of that scale away. And the demand is there. So, I mean, it just shows you that another element of the global recovery.
Debt, not so much sovereign debt.
Well,
European
people seem to be lapping that stuff up as well. I mean, you've seen the other story going out there about the Germans basically placing short-term paper at 0 or slightly negative rates.
Exactly, for the first time they went into negative.
So people are committed to holding sovereign paper in pension funds or whatever it is to the extent that they're prepared to give the Germans money only to get less back at the end of the period. Just amazing.
Okay, so who's filing for bankruptcy?
Well, the company that manufactures Hostess Twinkies. I don't know that you've ever eaten one of these. Big old guys like me have. They're like nasty little American confectionery, or sort of like a cake thing with cream inside.
Cream inside. Of course,
Hostess Twinkies.
Yes.
They're done. They're finished. The company has gone into bankruptcy, so you're going to have to find something else to snack on. Shouldn't be too hard,
Those have been around for forever.
I think so, like since the Second World War or something. But, everything in a consumer environment has its beginning and has its end. Fantastic.
Okay, Paul, so what else are you looking at? I know Vegas.
Final issue for the afternoon, unless you can let me carry on for another 5 minutes. Consumer Electronics Show. The big themes, this is an event which happens once a year in Vegas. It's huge. All of the tech journalists, our friends like Shapshak and Dingle are all over there, Anastasio. And what's more, they're like sending out these heroic tweets and blog posts about all the fabulous devices they're seeing. The two big trends apparently are slim and smart, as though there have ever been any other trends, slim and smart. Slim in terms of the thickness of the screens. Absolutely. And so on and so forth.
As light as possible and as small as possible.
And smart because everybody wants to get on the smartphone bandwagon. But the one joke throwaway line I saw is that the one stand at the Geek Consumer Electronics Show that isn't busy is that's dishing out condoms.
Dell is set to start a tablet soon, I hear.
Dell, this is true. Not only Dell, but Intel, everybody, like I say, wants to get onto this. So it's tablets, stuff like the iPad, the iPhone, somewhere in between is the kind of, hot space right now. And it's got to be thin and it's got to be touchscreen and so on and so forth. The trouble, of course, with consumer electronics is the hottest product doesn't necessarily translate into the most successful company. Because sometimes, they have these loss leaders and people make stuff and it costs them a fortune, like BlackBerry Research in Motion's Playbook, which was a boondoggle of note. They spent billions on it and they only sold a couple of 100,000 devices. Yeah. So the trouble is only Apple seems to be able to pull this off. And then, of course, Samsung's doing quite well in the marketplace.